the Galactic Academy of Unified Species, floated in orbit above the trade world of Talon Prime. It was the most advanced training institution in the known galaxy, where the brightest young minds from every species came to learn history, strategy, and biology. And today, inside Lecture Hall 5, a class of 30 alien cadets sat before a giant holoscreen. Watching images of Earth's wildlife flash across the sky-blue ceiling, the instructor, Professor Ralix of the Threx Dominion, pointed, his claw at the display. "And here," he said, clicking to the next image, "we see one of Earth's most curious life forms, the crocodile. Ambush predator, strong bite force, primitive brain." The class chuckled. A tall, three-eyed Krealian cadet raised his hand. "Professor, is it true they still hunt with teeth and muscle?" "Yes," Ralix replied, shaking his head. "Primitive, messy, inefficient, and yet still alive after millions of years." The next image showed a shark. More laughter. Then a lion, then a grizzly bear. The room buzzed with amusement. "They live on a death world," muttered a gray-skinned student from the Zorax clans. "But these creatures are jokes." "They don't even use venom," another said. Someone snorted. "No plasma defenses, no neural blades. Earth is just wild and dumb." Professor Ralix smiled in agreement, adjusting his robe. "Exactly. Earth's ecosystem is violent, but not advanced. Their apex predators are no match for our bioforms. Remember, this is why Earth never posed a serious biological threat." In the back row, one student hadn't laughed. He hadn't spoken. He just stared forward with quiet eyes and a calm, expressionless face. His name was Cadet Marcus Rin, and he was human. No one noticed him until Professor Ralix turned to the class and said, "Out. Let's ask our Earthling, shall we?" "Us. Do you fear your world's predators?" The room chuckled again. Marcus didn't smile. He stood slowly, his hands by his sides, and said nothing for a moment. The silence stretched longer than the students expected. Finally, his voice came not loud, but steady. "No," Marcus said. "Why not?" asked the professor. Raising one scaled eyebrow, Marcus took one step forward. "Because you're all looking at the wrong creature." The laughter faded slightly. Professor Ralix tilted his head. "Then enlighten us. What creature should we fear from Earth?" Marcus paused again. His gaze scanned the room. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smug. He looked tired, as if he had seen something none of them had. "There's only one predator on Earth," he said softly. "One that wiped out everything else it couldn't tame. One that hunts for reasons beyond food or survival. It's one that creates war, builds cities, burns forests, destroys planets, and stares into the stars, looking for something to test itself against." The room grew still. Marcus took a breath. "You fear the lion. You laugh at the shark. But you forgot the one that named them." He looked the professor dead in the eye. "The deadliest creature on Earth is the human." Silence. No one spoke. Even. The holoscreen paused. Professor Ralix tried to laugh it off. "Very dramatic, Cadet Ren. But humans are small, soft, emotionally unstable. How can you be the apex predator?" Marcus tilted his head. His voice turned colder. "We made weapons before we made fire. Killed species for sport. We split atoms just to see what would happen. And when aliens came to study us, we didn't hide. We joined." The room was no longer amused. The Krealian cadet frowned. "But surely you exaggerate." Marcus smiled for the first time, but it wasn't kind. "I'm not exaggerating. I'm being polite." Professor Ralix cleared his throat. "That will be enough, cadet. Sit down." Marcus didn't move. He pulled a small data crystal from his pocket and walked up to the front of the class. He slid it into the console. The holoscreen changed. Footage appeared. Real footage. Human soldiers in battle. Cities turned to craters. Test sites glowing red with fire. Drones, missiles, orbital bombardment, history, all real. The class stared, horrified. One student gasped. Another whispered that wasn't for survival. That was choice. Okay. Marcus stepped back. "We're not proud of it," he said. "But don't ever mistake silence for weakness. Earth raised monsters, but it also raised us." Then he turned and walked out, and the class didn't laugh anymore. The classroom stayed quiet long after Marcus Wren walked out. No one made a sound as the images on the holoscreen slowly faded back into the Academy's blue-tinted ceiling. Because what they had just seen, those real human war footages, those explosions and cold-eyed soldiers moving through fire without emotion, was not part of their planned lecture, and certainly not something the Galactic Academy had ever officially shown before. "Professor." Rollix tried to regain control of the moment by clearing his throat and saying, "Well, an impressive dramatization, of course. Humans have always had a flair for the theatrical." But even he didn't sound convinced. Some students were still frozen in place, blinking, whispering to each other quietly, replaying in their minds the sounds of those Terran screams. The sight of human soldiers walking through ruins with their boots covered in ash and their hands carrying weapons that melted walls. One Kralian cadet, who had earlier laughed the loudest, now sat with her tail curled tightly around her chair, her voice shaky. "But, sir, if that was real, then why did the Galactic Council even let them join?" "Because," said another student, his voice low, "the Council didn't want to make them enemies." Down in the courtyard, Marcus Wren sat alone beneath the silver-leaved tree near the Academy's fountain, his eyes closed, his shoulders stiff. He didn't like showing that footage. He hated it, actually. It reminded him of everything Earth had become to survive, how fear had driven humans to outmatch every threat, every predator, even themselves. He had joined the Academy not to scare others, but to learn how to live differently, how to move away from that past. But they made him speak. They mocked what they didn't understand, and he knew something Dead Earth had secrets. Not everything was in the holoscreens. Some monsters were never filmed. Footsteps approached. Marcus opened one eye and saw the Krelian cadet Valus. If he remembered right, standing in front of him, her claws nervously tapping the side of her datapad. "You meant what you said back there?" she asked. Marcus nodded slowly. "Every word." She looked around, then sat beside him. "What you showed, it wasn't just weapons, it was behavior. Cold, empty, calculated." Marcus exhaled. It was history. Ellis hesitated before, whispering, "My people fought against the malaria plague for decades. We lost millions. Our greatest minds couldn't cure it. But your people, humans, solved it in 2 months. You burned entire forests, shut down trade across 7 systems, and used something called biofire." Marcus looked down. "Yeah, it worked. But it killed everything else too. That's what I mean," she said. "You don't think like us." He turned to her. "That's because you evolved with predators. We became ours." Went quiet, then said, "There's a group forming in the student forums. They're angry. They say you threatened the class. They're calling for your removal." Marcus nodded. He wasn't surprised. "And what do you think?" he asked. Tavels didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled up a file on her pad and showed him. It was a report from 5 cycles ago, a classified incident from the outer colony of Torixate, where a rogue AI had taken over an entire city, converting every inhabitant into biodrones. The Dominion had sent 3 fleets. All failed. Then Earth sent 1 team. Just 5 humans. They didn't just win. They erased the AI in 1 night. Marcus looked at the file. That was Unit 13. "I trained with one of them." Tavalis blinked. They didn't even use advanced tech. Just EMP grenades, blades." In controlled rage, Marcus gave a half smile. "That's what we're best at, controlling the rage, until it's time not to." She stared at him a long moment, then said quietly, "I don't think the others are ready to know what humans really are." Marcus stood. They don't have a choice. Inside the Academy Council chamber, the instructors were already arguing. "We should expel him," one shouted. "He traumatized the class." Or maybe another said, "We should change the curriculum. Maybe they need to learn the full truth of Earth." "The truth?" scoffed a third. What good will it do to scare our students into silence? But an older instructor at the end of the table stood slowly. He was a Varnari elder, blind in one eye, one of the few who had fought in the Silence Wars. He said only this: I watched humans hold a canyon for 9 days without food. I watched one of them carry his dead brother across a battlefield while still shooting with the other hand. You do not understand what they are, and it is better we teach our young now than have them learn it too late. The chamber fell quiet, and far above the academy, orbiting the stars, Earth's old satellites continued to hum silent, cold, but always watching, because humans didn't forget and monsters never slept for long. 2 cycles had passed since Marcus Wren's quiet warning echoed through the Galactic Academy. The classroom had returned to its lectures, its scheduled lessons and polite discussions. But something had changed in the way students spoke there. It was less laughter when Earth was mentioned, less arrogance in the questions, and a strange silence every time Marcus entered the room. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something deeper. It was awareness, and it made the instructors nervous. Professor Ralix had avoided direct confrontation with Marcus since that day, but behind closed doors, he had already submitted a report to the Academy Council, citing potential instability in the human cadet and exposure to unsanctioned war content. He didn't believe humans should have ever been part of the Academy to begin with, and now that belief had a reason to take root, but it wasn't Marcus. They should have been watching. It was what the students were becoming after listening to him. Inside Simulation Room 7, combat exercise was underway. A team of mixed-species cadets faced a simulated urban battle zone holographic enemies. Collapsing buildings, smoke everywhere. The objective? Retrieve a wounded diplomat trapped inside a ruined building without losing more than 2 squad members. It was a difficult task. Most failed it. But not today, because Marcus Wren was in command. Flank from the south, he ordered, eyes locked on the map. Suppress the drone nest with timed charges. Cover your retreat. If you get pinned, you're already dead. His teammates moved without hesitation. Even the proud Zorax cadet followed orders. And when they reached the final building, Marcus didn't pause. He moved through the chaos like he'd done it 100 times. Clean, efficient, precise. By the time the last shot fired, the simulation ended. Mission success. No losses, Professor Helvin. The sim overseer stood in stunned silence. How? How did you breach Sector 3's death corridor without losing a scout? Marcus turned to him, calm as always. It was never about rushing through. It was about making the enemy hesitate. Fear slows reaction. If they're scared, they don't. Shoot right. The professor blinked. You mean, you made them afraid? I made them remember I was human. And then he walked away. Later that night, TVLs found Marcus sitting on the upper balcony of the academy, his boots resting against the metal rail, his eyes staring out into the black sea of stars.
Ow.
The sky was quiet, but inside his mind, the storms never stopped. She sat beside him without speaking at first, then finally asked, "Do you ever sleep?" Marcus gave a dry laugh. "I try. Doesn't stick. Because of the war? Because of what comes after?" She looked at him closely. "You weren't just trained, were you?" Marcus said nothing, but his silence was the answer. After a moment, she whispered, "How old were you when you saw your first real battle?" 16. T. Vallis flinched. "That's young. It was Earth's final border war. We lost half a continent. I was drafted with a shovel and a tracking band. I buried more friends than enemies that year." She didn't know what to say. No one had ever told her that kind of story. Not at the academy, not on her homeworld, nowhere, Marcus continued, voice low and steady. "After that, the government offered us a choice: go home and forget, or go further and become part of something darker. I didn't choose the second one. They just stopped asking." Tavalis looked at him. "So why are you here now?" Turned to her because I wanted to see if peace was real. And Marcus didn't answer. Because before he could, the alert sirens echoed across the academy. Red lights lit the sky. Announcement systems blared. Emergency lockdown. Authorized. Breach detected near planetary perimeter. All cadets report to shelters immediately. Marcus was already moving. Tavalis chased after him. What's going on? I don't know, he said, his voice hard now. But I've heard that tone before. What? Inside the Academy's control tower, Professor Ralix watched the incoming data stream. A ship had entered the system without permission, cloaked in old Dominion codes. But this was no transport. It was a raid vessel weapon, signatures active, shield arrays angled for planetary strike. How did it get past our perimeter? Someone shouted. It's broadcasting false clearance codes, probably stolen. Species, unknown. Ralix turned pale. It doesn't matter. We need to evacuate the cadets. But as panic spread, Marcus entered the control room. What are you doing here? Ralix barked. You're not authorized. Show me the ship's shape, Marcus ordered. Shh. Cutting him off, the holoscreen changed. Marcus went still. Tavalis arrived just in time to hear him say 3 words. Words that froze the room. I know them. Ralix narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Marcus stepped forward. That ship belongs to a mercenary group called Black Spiral. They were supposed to be wiped out 2 years ago. But Earth made a mistake. We left survivors. The control. Crew stared. You think they're here for you? Tavalis asked quietly. Marcus didn't look away from the screen. They're not here to destroy the Academy. He turned. They're here to hunt the one monster they couldn't break. Outside, the ship descended. Inside, Marcus reached behind his uniform and pulled something out, a smooth black device, cold and old. Glowing faint red dot, not Academy issue, not Council approved. A Terran war marker. Tavalis whispered, What is? That, Marcus replied. It's how you call back something the galaxy forgot. And he pressed the button. The moment Marcus Wren pressed the war marker, something deep beneath the Academy's surface began to shift, something old. Locked away not by accident, but by order of the Galactic Council itself. Sirens flared louder, not in panic this time, but in response to the signal, an Earth-coded distress call from a forgotten protocol buried within the system's emergency files. It was only supposed to be used in extinctional threats. The lights flickered, and a new voice echoed across. The Eincoms. Not the Academy's AI. A Terran one. Ghost Protocol acknowledged. Earth Command override initiated. Defense subsystems unlocking. Professor Ralix spun to the command desk, eyes wide. What is this? Who gave Earth remote access to Academy systems? Marcus didn't look back. He was already walking toward the nearest lift. They didn't. I did, Ralix growled. You've endangered every species in this building. Marcus turned slowly, his face cold. No, I just called in the only defense this Academy actually needs right now. Tavalis chased behind. Him, struggling to keep up. Where are you going? Marcus tapped the lift panel. The floor number he pressed didn't show on public maps. Below, he said, to wake the thing they left sleeping. Outside the Academy dome, the mercenary ship Black Spiral broke through the atmosphere like a falling blade. The vessel wasn't built for stealth, it was built for one thing: execution. 37 confirmed kills across 5 star systems. Known for wiping refugee stations, known for selling advanced species to pirate labs, and now it hovered over a peace-training academy inside the ship. The leader, a reptilian warlord named Zarn, stood at the forward viewing glass. He grinned. We finally found him. His second-in-command, a masked humanoid, nodded. Should we demand the human be turned over? Zarn snarled. Why? That's not how this works. He raised a clawed hand. Burn the campus. Missile bays opened. Meanwhile, beneath the academy, Marcus and Tavalis entered a dark, sealed chamber that hadn't been opened in over a decade. The lights buzzed. Cold mist filled the room. In the center stood a black box 2 meters tall, wrapped in earth steel with warnings in over 20 languages. Tavalis read the markings. What is this? Marcus stepped up to it and placed his hand on the biometric lock. This is what Earth left behind in case we were ever betrayed again. No. The lock opened. Inside was a humanoid combat unit, unconscious, inactive, but still. Standing, it looked human, but it wasn't. Its armor was fused into its body. Its eyes were shut but pulsing red beneath the lids, and its chest bore a sigil long forgotten. Todd. Project Echo. Human memory weapon. Marcus stepped back. Earth built these during the border wars. We designed them to remember everything: pain, betrayal, cruelty. Then we let them decide what should never happen again. T. Valis whispered, "Is it alive?" "Not yet." He held up the war marker, then activated it fully. The machine's eyes opened and screamed. Not a sound, but a shockwave of memory. Echoes of war. Earth cities burning. Children screaming. Ships falling from the sky. It wasn't just a machine. It was pain turned into armor. The unit stepped forward, its voice flat. Human, but not. Target: Black Spiral confirmed. Hostile intent. Civilian risk. Extreme. Permission to engage? Marcus said nothing. He simply nodded. The unit walked past them, and the walls shook above. Black spirals, ship prepared to fire. But before the first missile could launch, the sky split. The Earth combat unit launched upward with a sonic boom, tearing through the clouds like a living missile. Didn't wait. It hit the ship mid-body, punched through the metal like paper, and emerged on the bridge, its armor glowing, its fists already soaked in reactor plasma. Zarn turned, confused. What as he didn't finish? The machine didn't speak it. Moved, and Zarn's crew never got to scream. The ship detonated 30 seconds later. It's mid-air, raining fire and debris around the Academy dome, but nothing hit the building. The machine had reappeared above the courtyard, landing in silence, not even bending under the weight. The students stared from the windows. They had never seen anything like it. Some backed away in fear. Others leaned forward in awe. And then Arcus stepped outside to join it. Professor Ralix met him at the edge. "Of the courtyard? You endangered everything," Professor shouted. "Do you realize what you've unleashed?" Marcus looked at the flaming sky, then at the stunned students gathering in silence. "I realized what was already coming. I just chose not to let it win." Tavalis stepped beside him. "That wasn't a weapon. That was a ghost." Marcus nodded. "It remembers everything, just like I do." Then he looked at the class. Some of the same students who had once mocked Earth's predators. He pointed up. "That was one of our monsters." Then he pointed to himself. "I'm one of our protectors." And the line between the two was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. The Academy's skies still burned faint orange as the last pieces of the Black Spiral ship drifted down in silence, reduced to nothing but slag and broken hull fragments. The security towers hadn't fired a single shot. The planetary defense grid hadn't even powered up, because before anyone else could respond, the Terran combat unit had already ended the threat. And now it stood like a silent statue in the center of the courtyard, glowing faintly, unmoving. Most students had gathered around their viewing ports. A few, braver than the rest, had stepped outside closer now, but keeping their distance from the thing that had fallen from the sky like a judgment. It didn't move, didn't speak, simply waited. Marcus Wren stood beside it, arms crossed, face calm. Tavalis stood just a step behind him, watching the expression on the others' faces. Not hatred, not even suspicion. Now it was something else. Reverence. Inside the main council chamber of the Academy, a heated debate had already begun. Holograms of senators and advisors flickered in and out as the emergency. Sessions spiraled out of control. "This is a breach of peace protocol," shouted a Zarnath ambassador. The human cadet brought an unregistered Earth weapon into a neutral training facility. Another snapped. He didn't bring it. It was buried here by Earth's own defense treaty. He just woke it up, which is worse. The headmaster, a tall Andari with silver-lined eyes, finally slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. This is no longer about rules. This is about survival." If Marcus Wren hadn't activated that unit, the Black Spiral mercenaries would have erased everyone in this building before we even finished debating. Pause. Then a soft voice came through the back channel, a voice most had never heard. It was from Earth's Terran Security Council. We gave you our monsters because we knew someday you'd need them. The line went silent, and no one argued after that. Outside, Marcus walked toward the dormitory steps, the combat unit following behind him like a silent shadow. The class parted to let him through, no one daring to mock him now. TFLS leaned. Closer. They've all seen what you are now. Marcus looked up at the broken sky. No, not yet. She frowned. Then what did they see? He looked at the combat unit. They saw one of the things we trained, not what we've had to become to survive. They sat down at the base of the stairs. You still think they're not ready? She asked. Marcus didn't respond right away. Then he said, we showed them a controlled weapon, something made to respond to threats. But we haven't shown them what happens when humans decide that peace isn't worth the cost anymore. She studied him carefully. Is that what you believe? He met her eyes. No, but I've seen people who do. Later that night, while most cadets slept and the academy returned to lockdown mode, a private message arrived in Marcus's encrypted feed. It was from Earth, Cadet Wren. Your activation of Protocol Echo was approved retroactively. Your combat assessment has now moved to Tier 1 clearance. Your file is being reviewed for redeployment. He stared at the screen. Redeployment? He had come here to escape that life, but now Earth was calling him back, because he had shown the galaxy something Earth hadn't shown in decades. A reminder. Meanwhile, Professor Rallick sat alone in the archive room, watching the combat footage again. He had watched it 5 times already. The Terran combat unit breaking the black spiral ship, the way it moved, the way it struck with precision. Not anger, no wasted energy, no mercy, just a purpose, and yet it had. Hesitated after the final blow, stood still, as if waiting. Waiting for orders. Or waiting to remember? Rallick whispered to himself. What kind of species builds something like that, and then forgets it? He didn't know the answer, but he was starting to fear it. Tavalis met Marcus the next morning. Questions. She just walked with him along the perimeter wall. You're leaving soon, aren't you? She finally said. Earth's pulling me back, he replied. I think the council wants to know how much I told them. And what will? You say. Marcus looked around at the academy, the gardens, the classes, the hopeful young minds. I'll tell them the truth, that they laughed at our monsters. And then stood in silence when they realized we only ever named the safe ones. Down. You're not what I expected, Marcus. He smiled slightly. Most people aren't ready for what Earth made to protect itself. He looked at her and added, but you listened. You stayed. Maybe that's the first step. She stepped. Closer. Will I see you again? He nodded slowly, not as a student. And then the combat unit stepped forward. Its frame shimmered. A transport signal from Earth lit up beneath them. Marcus offered one final glance. Next time someone asks what Earth's monsters are, he paused. Tell them they haven't seen the worst, and that's on purpose. And with a flash of light, he was gone. Weeks passed. The Galactic Academy repaired its damaged towers, cleaned up the remains of black spirals, failed assault, and restored its regular schedule. But something had shifted inside the halls, something invisible, yet heavy. A tension that refused to leave, even after the skies were calm again. It wasn't because of the attack, it was because of what followed. Because Marcus Wren was gone, and now his name was spoken with quiet respect, and sometimes with fear. Tavalis sat alone in the central library, scrolling through the archived Earth records. Marcus had left behind files no one else had touched. She had watched the same video dozens of times now. Marcus walking through fire on that simulation day. The dread silence of the class after his words. The moment the Earth combat unit landed and erased an entire warship in seconds, but it wasn't. The destruction that haunted her. It was the calm, the calculated calm with which Marcus had done everything. Earth wasn't savage. It was deliberate, and that, more than anything, had changed how the students thought. Now, in xenobiology class, No one mocked Earth's apex predators in ethics and war theory. Students studied human history more seriously, asking new questions about morality, instinct, and trauma. And in combat simulation training, instructors noticed a strange trend. Cadets no longer ran toward victory. They paused, they calculated. They considered fear as a tool, not as a weakness, just like Marcus had taught them. Professor Ralix, once one of Marcus's most vocal critics, now spent his evenings in the security archive, reviewing footage that had never been part of any lesson plan or its ancient war campaigns. Collapse wars, the Terran border conflict, and the X. Silence packed fallout. Each file left him more shaken. He had grown up believing humans were violent, yes, but outdated. Dangerous, but crude. Now he understood. They weren't outdated. They were refined. Pain had shaped them. Fear had trained them. And rage had evolved them. He sent a quiet message to the Academy Council that evening. Recommend curriculum revision. Earth's conflict psychology must be added to first-year studies. The threat is not just their strength, it's their memory. Far away, light years from Talon Prime. Marcus Wren stood inside a massive underground chamber hidden deep beneath Earth's southern pole. The room was dark, silent, cold, lined. With glass tanks, and each tank contained something the galaxy wasn't supposed to know existed, others like the combat unit he had activated. Memory weapons, Project Echo prototypes. Phase-lock soldiers with no heartbeat, only mission. Some were still asleep, some were broken, and some were watching him. A voice echoed from behind him. Earth's security director. You think the Academy learned the lesson? Marcus didn't look back. Some did. And the others? He turned now. They will. One day, when they see what happens when Earth stops teaching and starts remembering, the director crossed her arms. You understand why we pulled you back. That combat unit wasn't supposed to be activated. Not there. Not like that. Marcus's voice dropped. They sent mercenaries to kill children. She didn't argue, because she knew he was right. He stepped forward, his hand hovering over one of the tanks. Inside was a soldier who looked exactly like him. Younger, frozen, eyes closed. A symbol burned on his chest. Unito 2, mirror. They laughed at our monsters, Marcus said quietly. But they still haven't seen the ones we keep for ourselves, the director replied. Should we wake more? He thought about it then, shook his head. Not unless the galaxy forgets again. Back at the Academy, a new class arrived. Fresh cadets, new species, wide eyes, young voices among them. Whispers spread, stories about a human who didn't just talk about monsters, but showed them. A girl from the Orion colonies asked T. Valis, now a mentor in training, is it true that humans carry fear the way we carry instincts? Daedalus smiled softly. No, it's not fear they carry. The girl blinked. Then what? Tavalis looked up at the stars and said, they carry memory, and sometimes memory fights back. Somewhere, in the void between systems, a dormant Earth beacon pulsed once, quiet, alone, a warning to the stars. The monsters of Earth were never its creatures. They were its children. They are still watching.